All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Love it. You've had coffee today. Thanks so much for joining us. We're super excited to close out South by Southwest EDU, and a special welcome to any of our South by crossover members. So today, we're going to start off by doing a mini exercise. Don't worry, no lunges, no jumping jacks. Just raise your hand if I ask a question and if you think the answer is yes. Have you ever felt isolated? Raise your hands. Have you ever felt alone? Have you ever felt like you were left without a voice? Have you ever felt like a misfit? Well, if you raised your hand once or all 4 times, then you've had a quick glimpse on what it feels like with somebody who has a sensory need, the isolation, the lack of having a voice. And today, with our wonderful panelists, we'll be talking about how Culture City is coming together to provide a voice to make sure that the nevers are made possible. So now let's get our convo started. You can visit all the bios on the app, so I'm going to skip all of that. But starting off, Chris, we've got Tony-nominated and Emmy winner, artist, performer, right with us today. He and his wife, Veronica, are wonderful Culture City board members, so thank you for your time. I've got Meg here, Meg Klinghofer on the very left. She's a pediatric speech pathologist, an author who just finished a book signing earlier, and a lovely Culture City trainer. Thank you, Meg. And of course, our fearless leader, Dr. Michelle Kong, who's the professor of pediatrics as her day job, but also the co-founder of our wonderful nonprofit. Thank you so much for being here. Awesome. Well, let's kick it off. I think it's important to know your why. Why are you here sitting on stage today, wearing the Culture City pin, and advocating for inclusion? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. I think for me, my why would come back to our story. You know, being a mom of a neurodivergent young boy who's now a teenager, and being a survivor of stroke, knowing what it feels like, both as a family and individually, to be excluded and not to have access to a community. I think that really is my why, knowing that this impacts not just the individual, but really the entire family unit.
Thanks. Chris?
I, too, am a parent to a 19-year-old neurodivergent child. Our son, CJ, was diagnosed with autism in 2007. And as an artist, I've always been the one in the back of the room screaming the loudest until someone noticed me. So the idea of creating space for as many people as we can, creating an awareness in a world that is full of sound and full of noise, to be able to create space for them and an awareness that we all can share in, that creates space for those who need a little extra room and need some help amplifying their point of view is incredibly important.
Thank you. Meg?
Yeah, so I myself am an autistic female, but my why for Culture City definitely goes back to little Meg. So when I was in preschool, there was a kid in my preschool class, and his name was Otto. And he always had a teacher next to him or an aide, and he would flick his wrist like this. He would stim. And I, the ever-curious preschooler, would skip up to him and ask him, Otto, you want to play with me? And the aide was doing the best she could with the knowledge that we had at the time and would say, oh, Meg, he's fine. You can just go back and join the rest of the class. And I was persistent for a while and would keep going up to Otto and asking if he wanted to play, and Otto was non-speaking or non-verbal. And eventually I just decided, okay, I'm gonna stop asking. And to this day, Otto stands out in my mind. I know he wanted friends, through life's experiences, through my professional background as a speech and language pathologist, through being autistic myself, and then just through autistic and neurodivergent friends that I have. I know he wanted to belong, and what I love about Culture City is that it's a what you see is what you get. We create spaces of belonging, and we say, come as you are. And I always like to say, and it's okay if we have different beliefs, but I'm like, God is in Culture City. There is no doubt. So how could I not be attracted to that energy?
Thank you for that. Michelle, we've already said the word sensory needs, neurodivergent a couple of times. For those of us in the audience who might not know what that means and how it's far beyond autism, could you describe for us the stats and what conditions might be a part of that?
So neurodivergent basically just means, and it refers to an individual where their mind processes and sees the world in a different way. And it really includes an entire spectrum of individuals across age, gender, race, and nationality, right? So you can have a kid with autism who experiences the world in a different way. You can have a veteran with PTSD who experiences the world in a different way, or an adult with Alzheimer's, for instance, or severe anxiety. And basically what it is that if you think of your brain, you and I process it in our own ways, and so we see our senses, we use our senses to experience this world, whether it's by touch, by smell, by hearing, by seeing bright lights and things like that, and we process that information in a very different way. So you are either a super processor or an under processor, but regardless, the output is unique to you. And so when we think about neurodivergent and sensory inclusiveness, it's really about how do we make our world and our society and our space where it is accessible and inclusive to everyone, regardless of how we process our world.
Awesome, thank you. One more question to you. We're now celebrating 10 years of Culture City. It's amazing that I've been a part of this for 8 of the 10 years, but you've had a front row seat from day 1 or even day 0. Tell us a little bit about your journey, about Abram, and how he really, started this entire movement.
Yeah, it's sometimes mind-boggling for me to think that it's been 10 years. Abram is now 16 years of age, and this started when he was 6. Our story really started even before then. So he was a neurotypical child, baby, meeting milestones, and then for a period of 2 to 3 years, he had a period of regression when he started losing his words and becoming really dysregulated when it came to being engaged with people and with different spaces. And so, we had so many experiences where, for instance, we would go to the airport, and because it was very overwhelming, and because he was a non-speaker, he did not have language to express himself, and he had kind of like Otto, your friend, Meg, he had different mannerisms where he just looked different. He sounded different and he looked different. And so, there was a lot of, we felt as a family that one hand, it was hard for him to be in those spaces, but it was also one where, whether it was, truly or it was just perceived, but we always felt sort of like the eye and the look and like, what are you doing and what's he doing and what are you guys doing here? The sense of not being wanted. And we, as we journeyed with him, we started becoming really socially isolated, even before this word became something that we all know because of the pandemic. But it really wasn't until I think our second boy, Judah, came along. Judah was 2 and he was very precocious, and Judah asked a very hard question. He, in his 2-year-old self, basically asked us, why were we not going to the zoo? Why were we not going to restaurants? And honestly, we had been so protective of Abram and ourselves that we didn't even realize that we were isolated. But because Judah asked that question, it really in a lot of ways opened our eyes, and we started seeing within the community where, oh my gosh, it wasn't just unique to us, it was so many different families were experiencing it, and it wasn't just individuals with autism, it was, again, the veterans, and there was a lot of commonality there. And that really led to the formation of Culture City. We intentionally spelled the culture with a K because it was sort of our dig against status quo to say that, what? Something's got to change, right? It's not enough to change our family. It's not enough to change our neighbor, but we really needed to change the culture of our society. And so we're so grateful and thankful to have amazing board members and team members in Culture City.
Amazing. Chris, I think you can resonate with a lot of what Michelle said, the social isolation. Over your journey with CJ, who's now 19, which blows my mind, how have you seen the world become more inclusive than when you started your journey, where I assume it would have been a lot more exclusive?
It's a very isolating thing to realize that there's something different about your child that, in a way, as we're seeking to put them in situations where they are comfortable, where they are able to adapt and process the world like a classroom, or like going to a Target, or going to a baseball game, or, in my case, going to a Broadway show, or being in a Broadway show and having your child come and sit and watch it, or be able to, sit through it. In some of those instances, you can have individual conversations, and the teacher or the aide or the house manager can make accommodations, right? And those are the things that we're aware of and very comfortable with. It's in the larger contexts where you become more vigilant. You become more aware of the fact that you're checking out at the grocery store, at the Target, and your child is doing something that might be sort of socially awkward, or just sort of outside of the norm of what we consider polite behavior. I'm a child of the South as well, and so children do what they're told, and they do it every time they're told to do something, and you know what I mean? And if that isn't what's happening, you feel that there are moments where you feel the judgment from other parents or just other people. If that were my child, they would not, we know those scenarios. To be in that position more times than you can count, it creates in you as a parent a sense of defensiveness. And as that happens, you close yourself off from the remaining parts of the society that you are required or need to engage with. And so the possibility of changing that narrative just a little bit in small ways, and they're not ways that come with a lot of fanfare, but I know that we have a daughter as well who's 4 years younger than CJ, and I know that when she left her fourth grade classroom, all of these children were seeking out people that just were different, and there seemed to be a sea change that was happening, and what we were seeing is they were being instructed on how to lean into their empathy, to look for those who are different than them, and to reach out to them like an Otto and say, hey, you are who you are, and we're here because we accept that. And those little moments become really encouraging, and they sort of put some wind in your sails a little bit. When we walk into a Lego store now, my son is very big into Legos. They know him by name. They make room for him. And we didn't have to say a word. Their staff, the hundreds of times that we've gone in there, they've gotten to know him, and they make accommodations, not in any spectacular or sort of change the policy of how they deal with customers kind of way, but it's an example of them meeting our son as an individual and meeting him where he is, as opposed to trying to funnel or squeeze him through some perceived invisible rule about how he is or isn't supposed to behave. And because of that, it's just one example, but because of that, he's able to, engage with them by himself, independent of us. He's able to make a transaction, it's a very sort of simple thing, we all do it, but when that becomes an issue, when it becomes something that isn't possible, as that progression happens and as that awareness grows, he's now getting to interact in the world in a way that he was not able to 5 years ago. And the work that we get to do at Culture City on a much larger scale, but also on a smaller scale, those little moments, they go so far into changing the entire range of possibilities. And as a parent, it's a really encouraging kind of thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're no longer putting a circle peg in a square hole.
No question.
Awesome. Meg, professionally, as a speech language pathologist, you've probably seen the world of inclusion change as you treat your pediatric patients, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about how that needle has shifted.
Yeah, even just last week, I had 2 different coffee, I guess they're called coffee dates, 2 different coffee dates with 2 people back in Salt Lake City. My hometown is in Park City, Utah, but they both found out that their children received different diagnoses, placing them on the neurodivergent spectrum, and they looked at me kind of with like big eyes of like, tell us what's next, you know, like, are they going to be okay? Or, you know, like, are they going to live by themselves? That's a big question that you hear. And sorry, I get emotional, but I'm going to not cry. But I said to them, there's never been a better time to be neurodivergent than 2024. And I know we have a lot more to do, a lot of systems that need help and assistance. But, you know, movements like Culture City, we are seeing the unseen. We are seeing these kids that are newly diagnosed. We're seeing grandmas and grandpas that have these new diagnoses of like Parkinson's or early onset dementia, because those are common diagnoses with sensory profiles, and often a sensory change will be the first sign that something is happening differently, that they're experiencing the world in a different way. So I think what I love to say is there's hope, and people, like when we see people, we can better love them and better accommodate them, and that's happening, and that is very encouraging. And I know all of us, we're not going anywhere, and we're gonna be here with you all even to support these kids and to support anyone that needs sensory accommodations or even a voice.
Awesome. You did great. No tears. Well, at least flowing down. Good job.
Thanks.
Michelle, you briefly touched on something that I want you to expand on. When you introduced Abram, you described him, you said non-speaker. And that's a term that's relatively new. In the past, we would have used nonverbal. Can you tell us the difference between non-speaking, nonverbal, and then how does Abram communicate with all of us here?
You know, for the longest time, as you alluded to, we would say someone is nonverbal, but nonverbal means you're not verbalizing, where non-speaking may be that because oftentimes they can verbalize, they just don't speak the way that you and I speak. So I think there is a distinct difference there. I think one of the biggest things that we've experienced with Abram, him being a non-speaker, is that it really builds in inherently a lot of unique barriers and challenges, because our society oftentimes have a lens where if you're a non-speaker, especially if you're younger, right, the assumption is therefore that because you do not speak, that you do not understand and that you do not have the capacity to be taught. And so when he was younger, it was really hard, you know, because I remember so many. You know, one of the things, Meg, I just thought of this when you were speaking, is, you know, I think about how much grace our kids must have, those who are, or adults who are non-speakers, because you understand and you know, but people are engaging with you in a way that they assume you don't. And so I remember, for instance, with Abram, as he was growing up, where he was in school and he would be put in a class situation where they were basically just kept teaching him this very basic rudimentary stuff. And we were like, why are you not teaching him more? He's capable of more, right? Because the other barrier is that oftentimes with the non-speakers, especially if you're an autist, you also have certain behaviors, right? Certain stims. And so the stims and the behaviors put together with the fact that maybe you need help with, you know, going to the bathroom or, you know, putting your clothes on, which are all very separate and different skills than language. I mean, it's totally different. But people just put all those things together and say, because you have those behaviors, because you cannot do these things that's appropriate, we think appropriate for your age, and because you do not talk, you are not capable of learning. And there's a complete difference between language and literacy and whether you can speak or not. And so with Abram, I think what we did was really just to envelop him and expose him to as much language as we possibly can. There was always music. We always talked to him like he knew exactly what we were saying, because we could see from like the sparkle in his eye. We were like, okay, you're totally there. I know your teachers and all these people are saying you cannot be taught and you are just cognitively not there. But we were like, I don't think so. I can see Abram in there. I know he's not talking, but he's there. And I'm, happy to report that now he's an A-grade student. He is a multimodal communicator, so he still is a non-speaker. He has, he has a couple words and a couple phrases, but he communicates with a keyboard and with a letterboard. But he was only able to do that because he learned language and he learned literacy, and he was only able to do that because the opportunity was given to him. And so I think that's what falls on us, right? As society, as teachers, as educators, as Culture City, to say, we gotta expose these kids to all the things, because you never know what that one thing is that's gonna be changing. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I personally love talking to Abram, and when he's done, he'll walk away. He'll say,
Yeah, he's
"Go
done,
Lake, go Lake." He'll tell you when he's done. So if you ever get a chance to talk to Abram, I highly encourage it, or anybody similar to Abram who's non-speaking or speaking. Chris, you touched on this briefly. You were on a little Broadway play called Hamilton. You played a little character called President George Washington. Some of you might have heard about it. When you were out there performing on stage, I'm sure you would have wished that CJ, Jalen, Veronica were all there together. And it might have been that V showed up one night. CJ might have attempted to come, but he had to step out within 5 minutes. What have been some of the largest struggles in having a child who's neurodivergent?
That's kind of like, that's an ocean-sized question.
We've got 36 minutes left.
Well, we brought CJ to a matinee of Hamilton, and he made it through the first act because there's a lot of action, and the second act gets really long, and there's ballads, and then Dad's yelling again, and after the show, he told Lynn, "It's too long. It's too long." Yes, it's too long, especially the second act. No, so that day was not the first time that he had come to see me in a show, but it was, that was a difficult day because it's hard to be Dad and
George Washington.
that other guy, yeah, George Washington. So those days are a little harrowing for me because the two most important things in my life are in the same room in terms of like what I do and my art, and this child that I love more than, my own breath. And so it's fraught, right? But we sit him in the back and we give him, the beautiful part is that our expectation is for him to engage with it as much as is comfortable. And the moment that it stops, our emphasis becomes, how do we get him comfortable? Can we get him to my dressing room if that's where he'd like to chill? No, he wanted to hang out in the lobby. And that's exactly what he did. And so by the time, he had found that, he was tired of sitting there, he was able to go out there, have some cold water and relax, watch a little YouTube. It was fine, But again, the standard for a successful day changes. It changes because of where he may happen to be at any given moment. And that's the biggest lesson that and my wife and I have learned throughout this whole process, is knowing when to push him so that he, to sort of hopefully expand his, his ability and his the way he, exists in time and in a different scenario, but also to continue to support him being able to do that. And success isn't sitting through a whole show but being miserable. Success is, I'm going to be in this room full of strangers. I'm going to see my dad up there yelling at people, and I'm going to see, Theo Lynn up there being yelled at and rapping really fast. And then, it's wonderful in that him coming in that environment is also very much a family type of environment, because Theo Lynn was there the day he was born. That's because we're boys. You know what I mean? So he was there, and I met my wife doing In the early developmental part of In the Heights. So these are familiar faces and familiar people. The joy I have is going in between the shows, so he gets to meet all of the people that I spend all of this time with and talk about my children with all the time. So that part, the theater is very much inducive to that the idea of family and the idea of knowing. It's very important to know where Dad spends his time when he's not at home, and it's to have that as sort of like the backdrop, that show as the backdrop of growing through another really important phase in his development, and to be honest, in our development as parents, is a really important thing.
That's awesome. Thank you. Quick reminder, if you have any questions, you can submit them on the app. Michelle, wow, we've talked about barriers, we've talked about problems. I think everybody understands now. Everybody's a little heavy-hearted. Let's shake it off, take a deep breath, and let's switch focus and become positive. What are some of the solutions? We've touched about Abram in an educational setting, how sometimes he's misunderstood, he's judged on the surface. What are we at Culture City doing to really change that at an educational level?
So I think at the core of it, Culture City is about inclusion and accessibility. And it's our mission, but I think it's also reflected in all the programs that we have. Whether it is, making theaters inclusive, where, folks like CJ or Abram or anyone or Meg, can come and feel like they belong and they're included. And so what we've done is very systematically put in systems in place so that the training happens, because the training is foundational, right? Because the training then allows for the people that will touch these families and individuals, whether it is in a conference setting like this, or whether it's in the theaters, where they understand these individuals and know how to engage and interact with them should there have an issue. And in addition to that, we also have resources. So for instance, your noise canceling headphone, if it's too loud, like that light that's kind of coming this way, that's actually really bright for me. So, but I'm okay with it, right? Because I've learned and I've practiced to be okay with it. But for somebody who's not okay with it yet, I mean, that can be very dysregulating and can make it where the person's not able to converse, right? And so we have things like sunglasses and things like that. But specifically from an education standpoint, I think, education is key. Right? Education is what is going to shape the present and the future. Is what's going to move the needle in all the aspects of life, right? Education. And so we do put a big focus on it. And so what we've done is we've gone to schools, and again, just like how we've done it with arenas and stadiums, we've gone to school and we've trained all the people in the school, right? Because if you imagine a child, for instance, who, let's say Meg sees you as a speech pathologist, you know this child, and so when the child comes to you, and if the child has a problem, you know how to deregulate, you know how to help regulate the child, and you know how to engage with the child and all of that. But the experience for that student starts the minute they get on that bus, the minute they get through the front door. By the time they get to Meg or special ed teacher or the teacher or the paraprofessional, sometimes it's 10 minutes, 30 minutes too late. And so that's why that's foundational to what we do, in that the training is everybody. Your paralegal person, your paraprofessionals, your aides, your school bus person, your cafeteria person. It has to be anybody and everybody who has a potential of an encounter with the student, so that if there is a problem, you can meet the child right there, right then, and be able to provide the resources. And so I'm really happy to say that to date, I think the most recent number, we've trained more than 1,500 different individuals across 50 school systems, actually more than that, across 75, I think, school systems, and 50 additional universities and colleges across 5 different states, which is, I think, I'm so proud of our team and proud of this work, but at the same time, that's only just 75 plus 50 schools. That's only 1,500 individuals. I mean, this literally has to be every teacher, every educator. Because, I just go back to Abram and think, if we as parents at that point did not push to say, no, he can learn, please teach him more, right? He would not be where he is today, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't teach the 5-year-old, you don't teach a 10-year-old, and then when they're 20, you're like, oh, you don't know how to do math, or you don't know how to read. read. Well, guess what? He doesn't know or she doesn't know because you never taught them, right? And so I think this is just something that we need to break and change. So I'm really happy that we're in this space.
Yeah. More work to be done. Real quick, proud moment. We've actually partnered with South by Southwest for a second year in a row and have made this entire conference inclusive. So if you have a sensory need, you can go to the JW Marriott, you can go to the Hilton Austin. We have sensory rooms there for you to decompress. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buzz in the air. If you need to step away, we've got that. There's sensory bags available throughout the footprint. And we had the honor of working with Han and Mary Kate to train the accessibility team. So if anybody from their team see somebody who might be a bit distressed, might be a bit upset, we have the ability to support them, take them to a safe space. And side note, this work is being done in about 150 different live events and festivals. So these festivals are exciting, full of energy, and we want to make sure it's a safe space for all. Meg, I'm going to jump to you, change it up a little. Tell us typically how somebody like Abram or CJ would communicate if they were non-speaking about some of the devices that they might use and what those barriers might be.
Yeah. So as Michelle put so well, communication is multimodal. So even if you don't have a device or you don't have an app that you're using body language, facial expression. There's just a lot more that's going on that is communicating messages for sure. But at the same time, that is limiting. So we do have out there, we have different communication apps, and then we have dedicated speech generating devices. And I'm sure a lot of you that are in here are educators, obviously, and teachers, and are familiar with some of these devices. And as a kind speech pathologist, I want to be honest about them. I think that they're the best tools that are out there. They're there right now of like using those for these kids and these adults that are non-speakers, but they're not that intuitive. They're not that easy to navigate. They're not easy for a teacher to take the speech pathologist at school's advice of, you need to be modeling this throughout the day. You need to be incorporating this into your lesson plan so that you can give them the language, because it's so hard to find the language on these devices. And teachers want to be there for their students, but it's really hard to be able to do that. And then you take them home, and you have mom and dad trying to find 5 minutes of time after their work day to sit down and look at these devices, these apps, and to figure out like, oh, I want to tell them about this using the device. But again, it's so hard to find the language that you need on the current devices and apps that are out there. So yeah, I will leave.
Now, part B to that. I know we're not quite ready yet, but I would be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to tell the folks here in the room and those live streaming a little bit about a solution that we're working on.
Yeah, something huge and amazing is going to be coming out very soon that is going to meet the needs of these communicators and is going to meet the user-friendly ease for teachers and parents to be doing the best practices of modeling and getting them the language that they need. And it's all centered around just presuming competence of these communicators, of these non-speaking kids and adults. They have stories they want to share. They don't just want to say, I want cookie, for 5 years, or that's yellow for 10 years. They want to be able to crack a joke with you. They want to be able to share their hope, their dream, their opinion. They want to know the current slang. Like, they are fully human, and this app is so amazing that's coming out, and it presumes competence, and it gives a voice. It gives a voice.
So Michelle, of course, you're beta testing it with Abram, and one of the features you've really talked about is the social story, prepping. And I think, Chris, you even mentioned that, or was it Veronica on the call from earlier this week said, yeah, both of you, you talked about, hey, every time we go out somewhere, we prep CJ. We have to show him photos. We have to explain that. So Michelle, you first, tell us a little bit about what a social story is and how that helps individuals like Abram, CJ prepare for an exciting day or a day different from their routine.
So I think for a lot of us, inherently structure and schedule is very grounding. And so when there's no structure and when it's not in the schedule, it can be disorienting. And so this is definitely true for individuals with sensory barriers, including Abram. And so what that is like, for instance, if we were to come to South by Southwest conference, this is not something that we do every day, clearly. And so this would be something that's out of routine, out of schedule, and unanticipated. And so the way, and research has shown this actually in multiple different scenarios, whether it's a hospital setting, whether it's in the OR, or whether it's in a community setting, if you can pre-expose the individual to the experience, it actually helps calm them and alleviates a lot of the anxieties of unknown, because what they can therefore be able to do is to have it in their mind and in their repertoire of thoughts and ideas that, okay, this is what South by Southwest looks like. This is what the walk from the hotel to South by Southwest looks like. And these are the people that I'll be encountering. These are the faces. This is what the conference room looks like. And so a social story is basically a mechanism that allows that to happen. And so what it is that it is a story that's told in a very concrete way, and it's usually in first-person language. So what a social story might look like coming to South by Southwest is you will, and it's very visually based, because the visuals allow you to, again, have that sort of pre-experience before the experience happens, which, again, research has shown to be very good for alleviating anxiety for people who are very, very structured and very concrete in their thinking. So in building a social story, I will take a picture of the hotel, I will take a picture of the main road intersection, and it would say, today is, what day is today? Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay. It'll be like, okay, today is Thursday. I'm staying at, let's say, the Hilton, and then you'll have a picture of Hilton, and you'll say, I'm gonna walk to South by Southwest conference, and then I might put a logo of South by Southwest. And basically, it takes the person through that experience with visuals and with concrete language of what that looks like. So then when the person then wakes up and it's time to go by South by Southwest, they're like, oh, this is kind of familiar. I've talked about this. I've seen this. I've read this. I've processed it. So it helps really regulate them. And so that's what social story is, and this is something that we currently have available in our Culture City app, which is, and it can be of any story. So you can imagine that repertoire is, limitless. We can create a story about coming here. We can create a story about going to Starbucks. Whatever it is that the child or the individual needs is what you want to create an ability to share that platform, so that if someone else needs to have that experience, they can either build their own or they can use what you've built.
That's awesome. I'm excited. Chris, going back to that call that we had earlier this week that nobody else here knows about, you mentioned, you and Veronica tried so many different devices with CJ, just different barriers, different ways of figuring out how it worked. You would spend hours on end. How do you think this is going to change and transform? And, is this something you wish you would have had 5 years ago, 10 years ago with CJ?
Technology is, obviously, especially in a place like this, we're all aware of how influential and how paradigm shifting it is on a daily basis. We're doing things today that we weren't able to do 6 months ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. CJ was he experienced also an acute regression, and he had about 40 words, and then they were all gone within a course of maybe 6 weeks, and we were left with his apraxia of speech. He was unable to process certain flavors, tastes, textures. And those are things that he still struggles with today. While he was unable to speak, while he was really going through an intensive process of relearning what his mouth was for, what it did, what its function was, we were given one of these I mean, we must have filed countless pieces of paper and to register, and we got this brick of a Windows-based tablet it must have weighed 10 pounds. We never got it to work. It ended up collecting dust. This app operates on a device that I would argue most people have, either a Mac or Apple or Android device. It's, from my experience with it, again, any of these efforts are only as effective as the ease in which they're supplied and made available, and the fact that it will be available and free and accessible, and the ability to engage with it is it's kind of dumb how easy it is to use. Obviously, if I can engage with it, it's working quite a miracle. But the idea that it's also crowdsourced is a really powerful thing. Your social story with Abram makes its way to me with my child, or I can then share that with someone else who has someone with these types of needs and needs to get some guidance. It's sort of like the spirit of what the internet was initially meant to do, which is connect people in a sort of pure way. It's weird to look at something that is, where the goal is to make it as broad and accessible as possible, and it's not associated with the dumpster fire that the internet has often turned into at every imaginable turn. But something that has been developed and is being developed and will be made available to the public in a way that's truly meant to help. It's truly meant to assist. There's no other goal behind it. There's no sort of get-rich-quick scheme behind it. This is in the spirit of what Culture City has always been about, which is helping, and just refining the ability to do it faster and better and to reach more people. It's a refreshing idea, but the fact that it actually exists is really, really exciting.
We're excited, and if you guys in the audience are interested, keep following us on social media, and we'll have news about it hopefully very soon. Now, Michelle, this wasn't a question that was on my postcard that we had prepped about, but Jack Knight. He's from Birmingham. He's a 30-year-old adult autistic individual who is non-speaking. The only way he verbally communicates is through singing Disney songs. But however, 6 years ago, when his mom took him for a session, he wrote a letter, and he expressed what he wanted to do and how we were able to make that never possible. Without giving away too much, can you share with everybody the journey of Jack and how he was able to bring a voice to himself through writing that letter, through running, and the rest is history?
So I think Jack's story is one that really shows the importance of believing in someone and not putting a limit on them. I think all of us can think of situations like this where, when you think about, making the nevers possible, which is kind of what the phrase that we use, it's really about saying, if we see an individual as someone with potential and without limit, then we can put them in positions where they can really be successful and to do it. So Jack was he's 32 now?
Shoot, sorry.
30, I think he's 32 or 33. But when Jack first started running, he told his mom, Diane, that he wanted to run marathons. But Jack wasn't a runner then. And so, Diane and the community that she built and the tribe around her, really, it was, I think back to when he first ran his first 5K, it took him more than 30 minutes to do it. But because he said, no, I want to run a marathon and this is what I want to do. And the mom said, okay, if this is what you want to do, this is what we'll do. There is a community and a tribe built around him that fast forward a few years later, he ran the New York City Marathon. And if you've ever been to New York City, it is the biggest marathon. There's more than 55,000 runners. And it is loud, it is bright, it is as sensory overwhelming as it can get.
I've never run it. That's crazy.
I mean,
we're going to change that, Chris.
I mean, you live in New York, so you know how this is, right?
Watched it.
But because this young man said, I want to do this, and I think I can do this, and the response from the family and us as Culture City and the people that supported him said, if you want to do this and you think you can do this, who are we to say that you cannot? Our responsibility, therefore, is to support you, to provide all the resources that you absolutely need, and to really believe in you and to give you a chance. And I think when you say giving people chances, is also accepting the fact that you may possibly fail, right? But that is normal. I run marathons, and I acknowledge every time I step on the line that I could not finish, I could fail. But that's true for anybody and everybody. So why is it that we're so afraid when it comes to our neurodivergent friend to say, okay, maybe you'll fail, so therefore I'm not going to do it? Why is that, right? And so I think Jack is a great story, and his family, of how the belief and the trust in him, right? And his trust in his family to say, you know what, we're going to do this. And we say, there's no limit. Let's do it.
Allowing that voice to be heard and to be acknowledged. Few more minutes before we go to Q&A. So what's one piece of advice each of you have here to our audience, to our live stream friends, that they can take back to their home in ways to support their loved ones who might have sensory needs, who might be neurodivergent, and making sure their voices are heard and acknowledged? So Meg, I'll start with you, and we'll come this way.
Yes, I'm going to put on my speech pathology hat and kind of give you all just a quick free advice backed by science. And that would be, first of all, under the umbrella of presuming competence that Michelle just so beautifully put into words. So if we presume competence of our child, of our grandparent, or our spouse that's non-speaking, something that we want to do is open up these opportunities to language-rich communication happening and connection happening. And I always say you just need two things when it comes to speech and language pathology and getting the voice out there. And that would be connection. And if they're your family member, you love them. Like, that is your child, that is your spouse. And as soon as you connect, you also want to find those opportunities to be narrating what's going on in your life. Like, what are you doing? What are you cooking for dinner? Narrate that. We have a tendency as humans to only want to speak to those that speak back. And that makes sense, because if you're left, quote unquote, hanging, like if you're saying, how's your day? And no one's responding back, you're going to go to the person that will respond back. Like, that will be the safe place to go, or that feels comfortable to you. But instead, just sitting and working through those moments where they're not necessarily saying anything back, but still ask the questions, tell the jokes, narrate. You have that connection in that language. They're building via the context. They are building language. And then when the app comes out, download the app, and we're going to piece it together and help really get that voice and all the language constructs out there so that they can tell the jokes again, state the opinions, argue with you. Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Chris?
The idea of offering advice makes me very nervous. If anyone had offered me advice, either at any point during our life with CJ, you listen to advice, but there's always a bit of a disconnect. Again, this is a kind of singular experience, and every day then becomes its own singular experience, and every struggle and every triumph becomes its own singular experience if you're still in a place where you're feeling isolated. Michelle and I had a conversation today about sort of this phase of life that our boys are entering into and that their siblings are entering into, and it's like we're having the conversation for the first time, but we could have it tomorrow and it would be another first-time conversation because things change on a daily basis. I think, though, that the idea that keeps coming back to me is that our job as parents, our job as compassionate and empathetic people is to look for ways to engage. You know, my job as an artist is to engage material or engage an idea and find a way that can hold your attention for a certain amount of time to hopefully provoke another thought. It is never to tell you what to think or how to think, but it's to provoke, to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. That's a mantra that a mentor gave me once about being an artist. This is about finding ways to meet as many people as you can exactly where they are. And if you find a way, if you see an opening, if you're looking for it, it's really not that difficult to find. But if you're looking for a reason or a way to connect to a person in a moment, whether they're in distress or not, whether they're not really having a conversation, but you ask them the question anyway, but you engage. As a theater actor, I'm keenly aware of whether or not an audience is with you or not, right? I'm keenly, it becomes a sixth sense. And our job is to look across a table or in a room and say hi, and then engage with them, whatever that response is. We're trained to accept it and then move the telling of the story forward. And I would say if you're a teacher, you have the same job. You know when the classroom's with you. You know when you walk in, when they all walk in, whether or not, you know if it's going to be a crazy day, if it's the day before spring break, you know they're going to be lunatics. Don't have the test that day. That's when you turn the lights off and turn on that episode of or that movie or whatever and let them do what they have to do with. But you know we all develop this sense of meeting people where they happen to be. And that becomes a really important thing, to be able to wake up every day as best you can and engage in that way, whether they're your child or they're a child in your classroom or they're a child you happen to see in the grocery store every day. And engage with the person who's taking care of them. Because again, we find ourselves isolated, and the only people that we can relate to are the other caregivers or the other people that are contributing to their development. And it becomes a very difficult thing to sort of relate to as the parent, but it's a really difficult thing to relate to if you're a family member or if you're, an acquaintance. Realize that that parent is going through something that you're not necessarily aware of the depth of. And to be able to remove that isolation can literally change someone's life, because we all live from moment to moment, and those little moments can that turn out, that work out well, where you find connection, you can soar from moments like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Michelle?
That's beautiful. I would say if I distill it down, it's probably what you said about meeting someone where they are. And I can, even as I go back with Abram, for instance, he loves water. Like, he loves water. He will sit, like when he was younger, and this was before he was able to communicate with us, because he was only 2 to 3 then, and he was non-speaking. He would splash water, and I realized even then that even in his splashing of water, right, with me just being there, meeting him as he splashed water and I splash water, there was a connection that was built there, and there was a bridge that was connecting me and him, and that became stronger and stronger over time. And I began to learn the language of Abram, what the sounds meant, what that eye twitch meant, what that facial expression meant. And I realized, face sound equals apple. Okay, I wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have known that either, because it sounds and looks nothing like apple, but that's actually what he wants, apple. But that required for me to meet him there versus thinking in my mind, okay, you are a 3-year-old, we need to learn how to kick the ball, we need to go play ball. Why are we still here splashing water 30 minutes later, right? That is about putting away my perceived idea and preconception of what should be, but rather just saying, this is your space, I need to enter your world to know you, and for you to know that it is safe. I think that's the other key, that there's love here and it is safe. And I fast forward now to today. So I'm a critical care doctor professionally, and I think about what we do, right? So often a kid comes in with respiratory failure, for instance, or shock, and we are very system-based and organ-based. So I say, okay, respiratory failure, you have difficulty breathing, I put you on the ventilator. You have shock, I give you fluid, I give you blood pressure medicine that helps your blood pressure comes up. You have an infection, I give you antibiotic. But in our quest for treatment and solution, sometimes we forget to see the person, right? We forget to see the 15-year-old that's got influenza, that was a basketballer who now is intubated in the ICU. And if you layer on top of it a person who is non-speaking and you don't understand or you don't ask the right questions of, what do they normally do on a good day? What are the things that make them happy? What are the things that are difficult for them? And you might be thinking, why is this important for you as a critical care doctor? Well, it's important because if I know, and I ask the right question, and I know that sounds are very difficult for you on a good day when you're at home. Our ICUs are very noisy, right? And so if I know that is your trigger, then I will make sure that we use a one voice where there's RT, nurses, MDs, but no, only one person talks, and we will minimize all those things because now I know who you are as a person beyond just the disease that you have. And so I think, meeting someone where they are is so applicable at every aspect of our life, whether it's an educator and a student, whether it's a mom and a child, or in my professional life as a doctor and a patient. I think there's a lot of value in power in saying, this is where you're at, let me meet you there, and let's just have a conversation. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you to each of you for your time today, for sharing, being open, being vulnerable. We've got less than 3 minutes, a couple of questions on the board. We'll be hanging out here for a little bit longer after the panel is officially done and the lights are off. So if we're unable to answer your question on stage with the microphone, please come up to us and we'll be happy to answer that for you afterwards. But real quick to Chris and Michelle, from one parent to another, having a neurodivergent child is tough. I sometimes find myself overwhelmed with emotions and questions on how I can help my daughter with her recent diagnosis. Is there a support group or an app I can join for help?
Depending on where you are, I know Facebook, there are a lot of Facebook groups that are there by other parents that are dealing with this very specific need. I would start there. I would type that into the Google search. People who are in your position, in our position, once we figured out that, it's a really good idea to talk to other parents because then I won't feel so crazy or think I'm so crazy, we're really good once we get that bug to be like, you need to go talk to somebody. Also, don't be afraid to go seek the help of a professional therapist. Just because perspective is really important, and I've found that to be really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think community is important. It's funny because we were just sharing this morning where, I was going through, just a different transition phase with Abram, but being able to share that story with you and you sharing your story normalized that experience and made me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is truly what happened, and this is okay. Culture City, we also have a pretty active social media presence, and so definitely we can engage with us that way. But definitely finding your tribe and your community, I think is important.
And there's a lot of us out there.
Awesome. We've got 54 seconds. There's a couple of questions that talk about how to make productions at a high school theater more inclusive, whether it's the cast or the crew, and then how can schools and universities be designed to better accommodate neurodivergent individuals. Michelle touched on this briefly, the school certification, the venue certification. In 35 seconds, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think it's great. Reach out to us, support@culturecity.org. I mean, this is what we do, and this is our mission, right? We want to make every school, every university, every theater, every conference inclusive. So reach out to us, and we will get you plugged in.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for your time today. Thank you to our lovely panelists and for South by Southwest EDU for having us. It's been a great time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.